Oni, Sego, Wache, Buju. I would like to acknowledge that we are upon the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga of the Credit, and what an honor it is to be here today. Mother Earth, despite all the chaos, all the isolation, is in full bloom here in High Park, where for over 10,000 years Indigenous peoples have been stewards of the land, of the water, of the animals. And here we are, and we say, Chi Miigwech.
Thank you to Indigenous knowledge keeper André Morriseau for joining us here at High Park today and for acknowledging the land that we're standing on. Hello, my name is Jenya and I work for the City of Toronto's Park Branch. Thank you for helping us keep the city safe today in these extraordinary circumstances by choosing to experience this year's cherry blossom season virtually at home. We are now experiencing what we call peak bloom, which means that most of the flowers on most of the trees have opened up. But we're going to let you take a look for yourself. We're going to take you on a quick tour down what we call Cherry Lane, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the history of the cherry blossoms here in High Park. Please enjoy the view. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the view. So we're here in High Park, which is one of the largest parks in Toronto, with an area of about 161 hectares or 398 acres. That makes it equivalent to about half the size of New York City's Central Park. And High Park is home to an incredible variety of natural habitats, including one of the few remaining stands of black oak savanna in the world. In addition to these natural habitats, the park is also home to a beautiful collection of ornamental flowering cherry trees. The trees that you see here on the hill and along West Park Road were a gift to the City of Toronto. They were donated in 1959 by the citizens of Tokyo as a symbol of friendship between Japan and Canada. So they were given as a gift to the City of Toronto and its residents. At the south end of the park, by the Jamie Bell Adventure Playground, there is another grove of trees that were donated in 1984 by Yoriki and Midori Iwasaki as a special gift and a joyful symbol of life. Between 1948 and 1982, Yoriki and Midori Iwasaki managed the Tairiku Jiho, or Continental Times, which is a semi-weekly Japanese and English language newspaper published right here in Toronto and serving the Issei, or first-generation Japanese community. In 2001, with the help of many donors to the Sakura project, chaired by the Consul General of Japan in Toronto, 34 additional trees were donated and planted by Hillside Gardens and along Grenadier Pond, and those trees were of the Akebono and Fugenzo varieties. Through the Sakura project, trees continued to be donated and planted. In 2017 and 2018, the city planted 50 additional trees along the path and on the hill here. And last year, to mark the 60th anniversary of that initial 1959 donation, 17 trees were donated to the city and planted here in High Park and elsewhere throughout the city of Toronto. At the anniversary celebration, Mayor John Tory was joined by Takako Ito, Consul General of Japan in Toronto. And at that celebration, there was a special plaque unveiled. There were musical performances by Tenten and Sakura Mai, and there was also the planting of a young sakura tree. I'm just going to walk over and show you one of these young trees. So you can see these young trees planted in tidy rows here between the older trees, and they've got this special fencing around them, which is here to protect this young and tender bark from being chewed up by wildlife, including beavers and rabbits. And while these trees are still small, they're already producing an abundance of beautiful blossoms, and we'll be able to enjoy these trees for many years to come, even if this year we have to enjoy them from home. Now, there's many varieties of cherry trees cultivated for their beautiful blossoms. The one most commonly associated with Sakura hanami is the Somei Yoshino cherry tree. So let's take a closer look at the flowers of this tree. The Somei Yoshino cherry has a single layer of 5 white petals with a star shape in the middle. And these flowers start out white and fade to pink before they fall. Here in High Park, we have 2 other varieties of ornamental flowering cherries. We have the Akebono cherries, which start pink and fade to white, and we have the Fugenzo cherries that bloom a little bit later, mid-May to June. And they have really beautiful kind of frilly flowers, and that happens because instead of 1 layer of petals, they have multiple layers of petals. So this Somei Yoshino cherry tree was actually cultivated in Toshima City, Japan. And it was developed especially for these beautiful blossoms that emerge all at once before the leaves unfurl in early spring. And to preserve these characteristics, all Somei Yoshino cherry trees are actually identical. They're not grown from seed, but instead they're cultivated from grafts, which are cuttings of the tree that are attached to the rootstock from another tree. In Japan, Sakura hanami has been marked for hundreds of years. Sakura means cherry blossom, and hanami means flower viewing. And it really is a flower viewing season. We're so happy that this year you've decided to join us virtually and experience the flower viewing season remotely to help us keep each other safe. There are 16 stages of the cherry blossoms, starting with the tsubomi, or buds. Then, as the very first flowers start to unfurl, that is known as saki hajime. We track the progression of the blooms at 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% until we reach peak bloom, which is mankai, where we are today. Now, what's going to start to happen next is the gentle rain of petals, known as the chiri hajime. And finally, we're going to go into a full-blown flower petal blizzard known as the Sakura Fubuki, or the sort of snowstorm of petals. In terms of timing of the cherry blossoms, it's really dependent on temperature. So the trees in the south of Japan start to bloom before those in the north. The Japanese Meteorological Agency actually tracks the Sakura Zensen, or the cherry blossom front, as it moves north on the island. So the blossoms will start in Okinawa around January, and they'll reach Tokyo by mid-March or early April. And even here in Toronto, you'll notice that trees that are located in areas that have a little bit warmer winter, or that start to warm up a little bit sooner in the spring, will bloom earlier than trees that are in cooler locations that take a little bit more time to warm up. And of course, the timing of the blossoms depends on the weather from year to year. So here in High Park, the earliest recorded peak bloom we had was April 15th, and the latest was May 15th, or about 10 days from where we are today. As an interesting fact, the timing of the peak bloom is really closely tied to the average daily temperature in March. So this year, the average daily temperature in March was 3.2 degrees Celsius, which suggested that we would hit peak bloom around April 27th. And so we did have very typical winter temperatures, and even a slightly warmer early spring, but then things were pretty cool in April. And those cool days and cold nights really slow up the blossoms. And then those warm sunny days that we were having really recently just push the blossoms to pop and open, and so we can enjoy them today. And the cherry blossoms are just one of the beautiful things that we can experience here in High Park. We already mentioned the black oak savanna. And so just going to remind you that once the park is open again and you come back to enjoy the park, please remember to always stay on the trails and always keep your dogs on a leash. Now, we did ask for some questions, and we got some questions through Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So I'm going to see a few of those and answer some questions. Okay. So the first question we have is, how long do Sakura trees live? Well, most cherry trees only live 30 or 40 years. But if you were listening to this presentation, you probably know that there's some exceptions. As the cherry trees start to get older, portions of them die off. And as we prune those back, you'll end up with these really unique shapes that you can see behind me. They're almost like fairy tale trees. And it's our dedicated forestry crews here at the city that keep these trees pruned, and they're keeping them blooming well into their 60s, which is pretty great. What is the significance of hanami, or flower viewing? Well, as we mentioned, these blossoms are very beautiful and very brief. So in Japan, the Sakura hanami symbolizes the fleeting or ephemeral nature of life. And it's also, of course, a joyous celebration of the arrival of spring. As part of those hanami celebrations, people eat and drink and play and listen to music. And there are special dishes like hanami dango and hanami bento, and sake is also drunk at these celebrations as well. How can I tell the difference between cherry trees and other flowering trees like crab apples? Well, there's two great ways to tell the difference. The first one has to do with the bark. So if you look on the cherry tree, it's got these really prominent pores called lenticels, and as the tree gets older, these pores align into fissures or cracks. And when you look on the tree, you'll see that they kind of run in horizontal lines. In apples, those will tend to run more vertically. For the other piece, you're going to have to look really closely at the flower. You might need a magnifying glass. I don't know if you'll be able to see this at home. But in the center of each flower, there's the female part of the flower, or the style. And in cherry trees, there's just a single style. But on apple trees, right at the end, that splits, and there are actually 5. So those are 2 tips. And then, of course, once they set fruit, if it's got apples on it, it's an apple tree. And if it's got cherries, it's a cherry tree. Okay, let's see if there are any else. Oh, I think that's it for our questions. So, yeah, these really are magnificent trees. We're so lucky that they're here, and they help us mark the arrival of spring each year. We wish that you could be here. We know that it's really hard, and we really appreciate it that you've all chosen to experience this at home, to help us keep each other safe. And we really hope that this has brought you some joy. I want to thank again everyone who submitted questions on Facebook and Instagram. I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope this brightened your day. I hope this has made your experience a little bit better today. Thank you so much, and please take care.